Namaste, good morning, and welcome to the 24th day of the Global Festival of Oneness, celebrating oneness with life and works of Jagat Guru Adi Shankara. And we are really fortunate to have the privilege of listening to so many Swamijis, Swaminis, thinkers, authors, management professors, and engineers, also people who have PhDs in Sanskrit and Advaita Vedanta throughout this 23 days of celebration to look at Adi Shankara in a whole new perspective. So this festival has started on Adi Shankara Jayanti on April 28th and has been going on for 23 days. We are now on day 24, session number 1. And we have 2 sessions. For those of you joining us today for the first time, we have 2 sessions every day, one at 6 o'clock in the morning, India Standard Time, and the second session at 6:30 p.m. India Standard Time. And every session features 2 speakers. And so we have 4 speakers. And on weekends, we also have some musical contributions of Adi Shankara as well, being presented by various vocalists and instrumentalists. Today, I have the unique privilege and honor to introduce Swami Nirviseshananda ji. His followers affectionately call him Nutan Swamiji. And some of us heard from his guru, Puja Swamiji, Bhumananda Tirtha, just a few hours ago. And it was such an inspiring presentation. Many people told me that, they had tears just listening to Swami's words and seeing his passion at such an age. He's probably close to 88 or 89 years old. So we have the privilege to listen to a younger Swamiji, Nutan Swamiji as we all call him. Swami Nirviseshananda Tirtha's topic will be scientific brilliance in Shankara's deliberations. As the knowledge of physics, chemistry, or mathematics does not depend on one's national, ethnic, or religious identity, so too is the knowledge of our real identity as revealed in the Upanishads, says Swami Nirviseshananda Tirtha ji. Swami Nirviseshananda Tirtha was deeply spiritual from a very young age. At 24, he was initiated into the pursuit of Brahma Vidya by Baba Gangadhara Paramahamsa of Dakshinikanda, West Bengal, the exact same guru that initiated Puja Swamiji as well. In 1987, he renounced his professional life and dedicated himself wholesomely to the service of Puja Swami Bhumananda Tirtha ji in all aspects of his mission. Again, throughout this festival, we have seen the strength of Guru Parampara in our Sanatana Dharma and the Indian heritage. And here is another classic example. We just heard from Puja Swamiji last night, and now we are hearing from Nutan Swamiji. Right from the beginning, Nutan Swamiji had a scientific quest and spiritual pursuit have been complementary in his search for the ultimate truth. Swamiji's special focus has been to expose the subtle truths of Vedanta with clarity as well as experiential depth. His exposition has inspired seekers to apply spirituality in all life situations. I've had the privilege to interact with Nutan Swamiji during the last global Bhagavad Gita convention that we had in Silicon Valley. The Swamiji and his team have done a fantastic work to spread the awareness and the strength of Bhagavad Gita through 3 global conferences. And I was privileged to spend some time. He is incredibly lucid in his presentation and incredibly profound in his thoughts. So we're going to watch a video of this presentation first, followed by a live Q&A. So we really thank Swamiji for taking the time. We did the video just to make sure there are no technical issues. So Swamiji will be with us. So please listen and post your questions in the chat window, and we will address them leisurely at the end of the video presentation. So please start the video presentation. Swamiji, thank you once again for not only sending us the video, for also joining us for a live Q&A. We're looking forward to hearing your message today.
I am happy to join all of you. First of all, I must thank the organizers for arranging such a knowledge festival for a full month. Our country, our India, is noted for its knowledge civilization. So it's very good that the organizers thought of arranging such a program. I shall start. Swarajya Samrajya Vibhutiresha Bhavat Kripa Shri Mahima Prasadat Prapta Maya Shri Gurave Mahatmane Namo Namastestu Punarnamostu Namo Namastestu Punarnamostu Namo Namastestu Punarnamostu Namastasmai Sadaikasmai Kasmai Chinmahase Namaha Yadetad Vishwarupena Rajate Guru Rajate Yadetad Vishwarupena Rajate Guru Rajate. Hari Om Tat Sat. See, as I said, ours is a knowledge civilization. Can you imagine that thousands and thousands of years ago, during the Rigvedic period, our rishis, whom I always call the scientists in the subject field, in the field of our inner reality, they had discovered and declared a great truth. They said, Prajnanam Brahma. Prajnanam Brahma, that is the knowledge, is the ultimate reality. I would like you to take your imagination so that you can apprehend that what can be the civilization that you know that Bhagavad Gita itself is 5,500 years old according to the calculation of Bhaskara. And Bhagavad Gita speaks everything, it is concising, it is presenting the Upanishadic knowledge. So how old can be the Upanishads? They are all prehistoric. We cannot say whether it is 10,000, 20,000, whatever. It is prehistoric. And in that period, when there was no civilization in the world anywhere, our people went to that extent in their scientific analysis that they discovered and declared that Prajnanam Brahma. That means that knowledge is the ultimate building block of the universe. It is the substratum, the ultimate reality of the universe. They had also discovered that what we refer to as I, that is our real identity, that itself is the Brahman. That means that is the substratum of the entire universe. When we say this knowledge is the ultimate reality, there is a little difference from what we understand by knowledge. Because knowledge, we generally understand I am the knower and I am knowing something. It is a knowledge about something else. I know the camera. The knowledge is about the camera. By knowing the camera, I don't become the camera. But in the entire field of spirituality, what we are dealing with is our real identity, the Atma, we say. So, the more and more we come to know about the Atma, we become that. And in the ultimate level, when the knowledge becomes my own, there the knower and the knowledge get fused together. The Atma, we become that Atma. So it is called the non-dual knowledge. So the substratum of the entire universe is that non-dual knowledge. This is what our rishis discovered. I call it the greatest discovery of human civilization. You can think about it. There cannot be any greater discovery in the human civilization than this. And it has sorted out all the problems for an individual, and if it is really perpetuated, if it is really practiced and propagated, it will solve all the problems of the society. Our Indian civilization has lived so long only because of this central truth which they had discovered. And from era to era, there had been people who discovered this truth firsthand and perpetuated it, so that the civilization has always been brought back on the auspicious path. That is why the Indian civilization has lived for such a long period. Now, whenever we talk of the civilization, there will always be some ups and downs in the civilization. That we can always find out when we go into the treasure of our ancient literature also. In Bhagavad Gita, we find that it is clearly noted that our kings were Rajarshis, they were all knower kings, and with time it has got degenerated. During the time of Mahabharata war, most of the kings had become corrupt. So the Mahabharata was necessary to set right the civilization, put it back on the auspicious track. Thereafter, after Mahabharata also, when we come to Buddha, we find from Buddha's life that he was having a real enquiry, but he could not find anywhere a knower or a teacher or a sage to instruct him. Whereas in Rama's time, we find when Rama had the similar doubt like Buddha, there were so many rishis to instruct him, and others, Vishwamitra and others, they asked Vasishtha to instruct him. But in case of Buddha, we find that he moved from ashram to ashram, it is written, and everywhere he found only perverted practices, Bali and all, and he could not find answer from any of the ashrams. It means that again the society had got degenerated. Particularly, Buddha was a son of aristocrat. He had the access to many places. So we have to understand the civilization was at a low. There are other points also to understand that, because we find that Buddha's fundamental basis of his propagation, which remained in our country for about 1300 years in full force before Shankaracharya arrived in 8th century. In Buddha's propagation, the fundamental building block, the base, was Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami. It was based on ethical values. It was based on characteral values. That means during his period, he found lack of values everywhere. That is what is mentioned also in the ashrams and everywhere. If the ashrams do not have the values, then the rest of the society definitely will not have. So it was based on ethics, the values, and also based on institution, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. I think Buddha was the first person to institute an institutional religion in our country. We had all these Vedas, Upanishads, Rishis, ashrams, everywhere spirituality was being practiced in a singular manner, in isolated manner. Whenever anybody would have enquiry, they would find out where they can go, they will find out a sage and go to him, as Shankara went to far away on the bank of Narmada to Govindapada. So they would be able to go to the different rishis and get their knowledge, get their enquiry fulfilled. But there was no institutional sannyasa or institutional religion at that time. Buddha was perhaps the first to institute that kind of a religion, and it had spread all over India and outskirts also towards Afghanistan as well as towards the east. But there also we find that before Shankara, much before Shankara, they say that within 40 years, 50 years of Buddha's passing away, there were so many factions of Buddhism, and the whole Buddhism got converted into, again, worship of Buddha idol in various temples and all. And when Shankara came, it was all Buddha worship going on in various places. During Shankara's period, we found that he had to fight with both, he had to defeat both Buddhist as well as the Vedic ritualists. When we talk about the Vedas, Vedas have got two clear-cut divisions. The first portion of the Vedas is called Karma Kanda, that is the ritualistic section of the Vedas. And the latter part of the Vedas is called Jnana Kanda, which consists of the Upanishads. So, normally by Vedas, when we say Vedas, we are referring to the Karma Kanda, and Upanishads we refer to as Upanishads, but actually the both are part of the Vedas. Now, we find that if we analyze over the time, often the ritualistic part takes over the knowledge part. By its very nature, knowledge is reserved for subtle thinking people, and it may happen that the rituals are done by many, practiced by many. They may not even practice according to the Vedic prescriptions, but it will be practiced all over, and the rituals will dominate over the knowledge. That is what happened before Shankara, during Jaimini's time also. They said that the Upanishads are only eulogies. They have no meaning. The rituals are the main thing. Whereas Shankara came to put back the Upanishads, the knowledge of the Upanishads in its own glory. He had to establish that the rituals will not take us to the ultimate goal of life. It is the Upanishadic knowledge which can fulfill man and which is the most beneficial for the well-being of the society. Now, generally by Upanishads, we often refer to them as the philosophy of the Upanishads. Truly speaking, the Upanishads are not at all philosophy, nor it is commandments. That is direction, you do this, you do that. Not at all. Actually, the Upanishads are record of the results of experiments they did. When we talk about physics, chemistry, mathematics, do they depend on the experimenters or the practitioners' ethnic origin, his religion, his geographical origin, his ethnic origin? It is independent of everything. Whoever is experimenting physics, chemistry, mathematics, they are not changing. It is equal, it is same all over the world. Like that, the science of the inner reality, the Atma, as we say, the science of the Brahman, it is absolutely independent of the religious, ethnic, geographical identity of the practitioner. We have to understand that the Upanishads are not philosophy, are not commandments, but they are results, records of the experiments, experimental results done by our rishis. Now, in Shankara's deliberations, why did we title this talk as Scientific Brilliance in Shankara's Deliberations? It is amazing to find that Shankara lived about 1200 years ago. And our scientists, if we think, they are all within the last 500 years, or the major part of it is only about 200 years, within the last 200 years. Now, Shankara lived 1200 years ago, but in his approach, in his argument with the others, in his deliberations, everywhere he has stressed the experiment and the verifiability of whatever is being stated. He has clearly shown that the Vedic utterances, they cannot be proved. Suppose the Vedas are depending on certain concepts, that our Hindu religion, as we generally say also, it is depending on certain concepts, that it is standing on 4 pillars. What is that? A concept of God, a concept of Punarjanma, concept of karma, and the concept of heaven and hell. Now, Shankara was very clear in his statements that heaven, hell, Punarjanma, they cannot be verified. Suppose I say that, can you prove that there is heaven? Nobody can prove that there is heaven. But can you disprove that there is heaven? No, you cannot disprove also. There might be heaven, who knows? So there will always be doubt about these concepts, which the entire ritualistic part of the Vedas they are talking about, that you do this yaga, then you will go to this heaven. If you do it wrongly, then you will go to this hell, etc. And this is your karma of Punarjanma, so you have to do this your previous janma. If you do this, then you will suffer in the next janma. All these relations nobody can prove. So Shankaracharya is clearly stating in his Bhashya, it is the Bhashya is Brahma Sutra Bhashya 3.3.32. He has very categorically stated, Karma phale hi swargadau anubhava anarudhe syat ashanka bhaved va nava iti naveti. He says karma phale hi, when we are talking about the result of the rituals, the yaga, yajnas done in the ritualistic part of the Vedas. Swargadau, like Swarga, Naraka, etc. Anubhava anarudhe, they are all non-experiential. Anubhava means experience, non-experiential. There always be ashanka syat, there always will be doubt. What is the doubt? Bhaved ba naveti, whether it is there or whether it is not there. This doubt cannot be resolved. Anubhava arudham tu jnana phalam. But whatever is the result of knowledge, the result of knowledge is absolute freedom or experience of the Atma, experience of the identity of the Atma with the Brahman. They are all within the ken of experience. So he says, Anubhava arudham tu jnana phalam. That whatever is the result of jnana, that is experiential. So for a seeker of truth, he has given the clear direction. A seeker of truth should ignore all the statements of the Vedas which cannot be proved, and they should restrict themselves only to the experiential truth, what can be verified. About verification also he is very clear. Suppose people would say that science means repeatability. How scientific truths can be verified? Because you can repeat the experiment. Scientific truth in science, objective science, we are dealing with objects. So you can do the experiment again and again with the object, and you can see whether whatever is stated is true or not. That is called the repeatability or verifiability. Now in this case, when we are looking into our own self, finding out who am I, then what is our experiment with? What is the object of our experiment? The object itself is the subject in this case. That I is the object. We are experimenting with that I and finding out what is that I, who am I, we are finding out. So the repeatability cannot be like the objective experiment done with the object again and again you are doing. Here the repeatability will come in each seeker's life. That is, each inquirer will have to inquire within and find out who am I. And it has to be his first-hand experience when he realizes that I am Brahman, or I am the universal consciousness. I am not limited by the body-mind complex at all. The whole universe is appearing in me, the consciousness. And this consciousness is not body-limited consciousness. It cannot be different for different people. This consciousness transcends entire chain of objects. We have to understand these truths very well. That the whole objectude which consists of the world or anything we think about, even our concept of God, even the knowledge we are talking about, the concept of reality, etc., they are all object. Why? Because I, the revealer, is revealing all those things. Even a thought is an object. It might be subtle, but it is an object. A concept is an object. It is revealed by the I, the consciousness. and that consciousness is the ultimate reality. So, we have to understand that as we are doing the experiment with this ultimate consciousness or the real identity of I, each seeker will have to finally discover this truth first hand in his own case. Then he will confirm that whatever he had known, whatever he had known from the Shastras, that is true. That is what has happened in our country from era to era. Not only now, thousands of years people have been experimenting and confirming and reconfirming. Otherwise, these Upanishads would not have stayed for this unknown period of time from the prehistoric age. We don't know how old are they. Thousands and thousands of years ago. Even the literature and even the science also, it goes away in a few hundred years. Can you think of something remaining intact for thousands and thousands of years? It is only because of this fundamental truth which can be verified by anybody who would like to do it, who would wish to do it, and who is ready to undertake the discipline and the purificatory process to know it. There also Shankara is very clear. Suppose to understand anything of science, can people understand? Even during Einstein's period, I have heard that, I think it is Eddington who made the statement that only 3 people in the world understand special theory of relativity. Forget about general theory of relativity and others. So, to understand the subtle concepts of science, one has to undergo a certain training, certain discipline. He has to make his intelligence sharper, purer, etc. And to understand this ultimate truth, naturally we have to go beyond all our concepts. The concepts will bind us, they will constrict our mind. To become absolutely free of all these concepts, it means a great sadhana of transforming our whole being. And Shankaracharya repeatedly stresses that point, that it is not the rituals which make a person fit for knowledge. It is the sadhana chatushtaya, the viveka, vairagya, shamadamadi shadga sampattihi, mumuksha. These are the 4-fold virtues of a person which makes a person fit for knowledge. It is clearly discussed. That is why Shankara's deliberations are also emphasizing repeatedly the ethics and the purity of our being, the purity of an inquirer, of a seeker. He has to cultivate the 4-fold, the sadhana chatushtaya, the 4-fold virtues. Even in the beginning of Brahma Sutra, athato brahma jidyasa, Shankaracharya says in his bhashya that ataha, now therefore. What is this therefore? That now we are starting the Brahma Jidyasa. Brahma Jidyasa means the inquiry into the ultimate truth, inquiry into the ultimate reality. What is this therefore? Is it that a person has done enough of yaga, yajna, he has lived with the rituals, all the Vedic rituals, and now he has become competent to inquire, because it is the last part of the Vedas. Upanishads are called Vedashira or Vedanta. That is the end part of the Vedas. Now he has done the previous portion, he has practiced all the rituals, and that is how he is now fit for knowledge. Shankara says no. The rituals are designed in such a manner that performing the rituals properly, following the Vedic prescriptions, one should get purified and one should develop enough of viveka, vairagya and the sadhana chatushtaya. If it has not come out of his performance of the rituals, then he is not fit for knowledge. And this is very well discussed in Kathopanishad right from the beginning in the story, that Vajashrava was performing a great yaga, but he was doing it wrongly. The Upanishad shows that his mind was smitten with desires. He was not free of desires at all. Whereas Nachiketa, a 7-year-old, 8-year-old boy, his mind was having enough of sadhana chatushtaya. The whole story of Nachiketa, during the conversation with Yamaraja, it shows that the Nachiketa had all the 4-fold qualities in ample measure, and that is how he became fit for knowledge. Yamaraja even said that Brahma sadhana is wide open before you simply walk in, because it is only the maturation of these virtues that makes one Finally, a knower, he can absorb the knowledge, he can actualize the knowledge. So it is very clearly stated there that it is not the performance of the Vedic rituals, but the acquiring the fourfold qualities by following discipline and purity and vichara, introspection, that makes one a fit recipient of knowledge. In Viveka Chudamani also, Shankaracharya says, it is Viveka Chudamani 474, Shastram yuktir deshikoktih pramanam, chantas siddha swanubhutih pramanam. First, one has to listen to the truth from the Shastras, from the scriptures. Then whatever he has heard from the Shastras, either from listening to somebody or reading the Shastras, he has to analyze with his intelligence, yuktihi. Because whatever is not rational, it is not to refute that no, it is not true, but to inquire that where lies the truth, and apply all the intelligence to analyze it, to understand it. By repeated analysis, we have to find out that whether my intelligence can accept it or not. When the intelligence gets quite confirmed about the truth, Deshikoktih pramanam, you confirm with the Guru, with the knower, that whatever I have known and whatever the knower is saying, that is matching or not, are the same. Chanta siddha swanubhutih pramanam. But ultimately the consummation of knowledge is in experience, is through the experience. Ultimately, whatever initially you started with the word, say it is called Shabda or the word. Say asangoham. I am saying asangoham. That means I am unattached, I am untainted. I can at that time take the meaning of the word as true on my faith in my Guru or in the Shastras, and I start thinking about it. But finally, it has to become my own realization. It has to become, I must realize that yes, as the Atma, I am not attached to anything at all. I am not affected, I am unaffected, I am unlimited, I am unbounded, I am not touched by anything at all. That should become one's personal experience. Then only it can be accepted. That is what Shankaracharya has stressed repeatedly. So we find that his short life of maybe 32 years or so, he has done so much. It is amazing in the form of rational scientific approach, in the form of whatever was needed at that time in the society, that he established 4 corners of India. He established the Sannyasa Pitham, Sannyasa Ashram, to integrate. This is the first time perhaps somebody like Buddha had institutionalized, the first time established an institutional religion. Shankara first time institutionalized sannyasa, we can say. Sannyasins were otherwise all stray, they were alone, they were separated. This is the first time he integrated the whole Upanishadic Vidya through the 4 sannyasa pitha, that Shankaracharya pithas, which are still remaining. That also speaks about the greatness of Shankaracharya. Can you imagine, 1200 years have passed, the pithas are still there, and through their propagation, so it has gone around all over the country and outside also. And the fundamental basis of the whole thing is ethics, that is the transformation of our being. It is not just doing some rituals where all the desires remain. I desire for heaven, I desire for this, I desire for property, and do some yajna. No, it has to be entirely different. I have to get freed of all desires, all constrictions of the mind. Everything has to go. I have to become absolutely free of all constrictions and bondages. And that has to be a personal experience which Shankaracharya has stressed again and again and again.
That was truly brilliant, especially the definition of Upanishads. I have never heard, and there are many more people on the chat window saying they have never heard Upanishads being talked about in this way, that these are experiments, they are fully verifiable, and every individual can verify in their own little way. It's not that it's a philosophy. I think that was just, again, we have heard that Adi Shankara's uniqueness is, prasanna gambhiryam. It's profound, it's simple. And you have once again shared this Adi Shankara's message very profoundly and very simply. It's not rocket science. It is simple. So thank you so much. We have lots of questions, and we have close to 200 people across various platforms watching you, and in offering their gratitude for your message. So a few questions I've taken note. First one is, your opening prayer itself, everybody fell in love. So can you talk a bit about the prayer, and what is the source of it, and any quick meaning about it?
Ravi, I thought that when you were saying just now, I thought a little more of addition will do, that this definition of Upanishad you are speaking about. Everybody knows that we say Vedas are apaurushaya, apaurushaya. People think that as if they have not human origin, they have come down from the sky. So it is only a very naive idea. Apaurushaya means anybody who has transcended his limited ego and has become one with the universal consciousness. He becomes Apaurushaya. He transcends the small Purusha. So whatever is the real truth, the ultimate truth, he just sees it and he speaks about it. So it becomes statements from such people who have transcended. So the Vedas is transcendental. So there also it means that everybody who goes beyond this limit of raga dvesha, as according to Bhagavad Gita, or the limitations of our egoistic identity, and identifies with the universal identity, he has to realize the same truth. It's an experiment that when he crosses over the limitations of the usual restricted, limited humanhood, he finds this truth, and that is recorded, and it has been reconfirmed. Those who are coming, they need not record it again, but they record in the interpretations. They reinterpret in various ways. Achha, now, the first question you said, that is from Viveka Chudamani, 517 and 519. It is there in our ashram evening prayer. If anybody wants, if they write, we can send it by email also.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Second question is, how does Shankara shift focus onto the Jnana Kanda and sort of lessen the priority of Karma Kanda, even though they're both from the Vedas? They're both sort of prescribed by the Shrutis. How does he manage to move people from the Karma Kanda aspect and into Jnana Kanda? How did he succeed?
See, there lies his genius, that even people like Jaimini miss the whole purpose of the Vedas. The Vedas are progressing, they have recorded everything, but finally the whole thing, it goes to the pinnacle of knowledge. But how some people have been missing it. It is very clearly stated in the Upanishads, in Mundaka Upanishad, in Katha Upanishad, everywhere, particularly in Mundaka Upanishad. It is very clearly stated that there is nothing wrong with the rituals, but it is absolutely wrong if you get limited by the rituals. Suppose somebody says that I am in class 7, I don't want to pass over to class 8 or don't want to go to the college or the university. The 7 is enough. Class 7, whatever I have taught, that is final and that is okay. Then it's foolishness. Like that, from the rituals, there is nothing wrong in the rituals. It is all meant for purification of our mind. Even Shankaracharya says that, what is that? Chittasya shuddhaye karma, natu vastu upalabdhaye. Vastu siddhir vicharena, na kinchit karma kotivi. Na kinchit karma kotivi. He is saying the chittasya shuddhaye karma. But can we stop at that point? They have missed the goal there. So it is his keenness, his sharpness. Anybody with that keenness, I will realize the ultimate. If that that urge is there, naturally they will not stop at that point. And
Mm.
I cannot, but I have to say that basically it is his Guru Govindapada who must have shown him that this is the way. We have to
Mm.
go to the Prapya Varan Nibodhata, go to a Shrestha and know it without any doubt. So when we can have in our life a proper Guru, many may have, but they don't understand what the Guru is. If we understand what the Guru represents and we can appreciate his value, then the Guru points out that this is what is the ultimate goal. And wherever we deviate from there, it is the Guru's duty to point out the where we are deviating and put us back on the track. Is it okay?
Fantastic. In fact, Puja Swamiji, this in his talk, actually said that how Adi Shankara's father, when Adi Shankara asked him, how do I know Brahmagnana, and his father said, you should go to your guru Govindapada, and he is near Narmada. And the story I probably said so many times during the day today, because how many of us as adults are giving that kind of guidance to our children, and how many children are actually capturing it, and then setting on this 1,000-mile journey to find the guru when there was no GPS and no nothing. So really the importance of the guru has been emphasized over and over again during this festival. And you have once again mentioned that.
A little interesting episode here that in my case, I was spiritual right from the beginning, I said. But when I joined PhD, there was a doubt in the mind, which is the path? There was some doubt. So immediately I remembered that I had listened to our Puja Swami Bhumananda Tirthaji when I was in school, and he had mentioned about Baba Gangadhara Tirtha, Baba Gangadhara Paramahamsa of Dakshin Khanda. So somehow I remembered the name and the place name. And with that, I went ahead and came to Baba. So it is it is actually depending on the inmost desires of our mind. The inmost level, the mind has to have the pure desires. If you want the truth and only the truth, nothing else, no power, no big things or a famous lecturer, fame, anything. If you are looking for truth and only the truth, we will be led to the truth, no doubt about it. Particularly in our country, anywhere in the world, we will be led to the truth, no doubt.
Wonderful. Excellent story, excellent incident for you. Can you repeat this sadhana chatushtaya one more time? What are the 4 qualities?
Viveka, Vairagya, Shama, Damadi, Shadga Sampatti, it is called. It is Shama, Dama, Titiksha, Uparati, Shraddha, Samadhana. The 6 qualities. See, whenever there's Sampatti, means treasure. Now, in spirituality, the treasure can be only internal treasure. We don't speak about gold or dollar or anything outside at all. Even fame, we don't speak about. These are all treasure of our mind, and they are the real treasure. And the last one is Mumuksha. That is Viveka, Vairagya, Shamadamadi, Shatka Sampatti, and Mumuksha. Should I explain a little more? No.
Maybe in English, what are the equivalent English words?
Viveka, English, it will all get diluted. Viveka, we translate as discrimination. But in Sanskrit, it is defined as difference between permanent and impermanent, perishable and imperishable. Now, I always say that for a beginner, and particularly for the people in the world who are still active in the world, they will not bother about what is permanent and impermanent. But for them, the first stage of Viveka, I define as the distinction between Shreyas and Preyas. Shreyas is whatever takes us to the ultimate auspicious goal of life, and Preyas is whatever is immediately present, but it takes us away from the auspicious goal. It is very well defined in the 2nd chapter of Kathopanishad. And there, the Viveka becomes very realistic, applicable to our daily life. That always in every junction, we have to select which path we will go to choose that. We have to apply this Viveka to see that I am going on the path of Shreyas, not deviated by attraction towards the Preyas.
Perfect.
Then comes Vairagya. Vairagya can be dispassion. It doesn't mean much. It is true. All meanings are true. But I define it as impersonality. Which manager or administrator or a corporate person is there who will not like to have impersonality? Even any otherwise also, impersonality give you the true picture of the world as well as yourself. Viraga has come from no raga. Raga means color. The color we apply to the world always is this is me, this is mine, and this is others and all. And our preference and prejudice, raga dvesha. We are always applying the color of raga dvesha, preference and prejudice on the world. Viraga means that color has been taken away. So Vairagya means you are free of the raga dvesha. So you are absolutely impersonal. You will know what the world is and you will know what you are. And will not such a manager or a professional behave everywhere as an excellent person? So we all, in the name of, the moment we hear of Vairagya, we run away 100 kilometers from there. But truly speaking, it is impersonality which everybody should crave for. It is not just leaving everything and walking off. It is remaining in the society, in everything, and knowing the right path, that what is the right, what is true, truly the world is and we are. The other ones, I don't think there is time to do.
Okay. So I'm hearing an echo. Also, what readings do you recommend for people on the path of knowledge, especially beginners? So there are a lot of people, one of the goals of this festival is to create curiosity. We said, first of all, we want to create awareness of Adi Shankara, which I think we have done, a sort of, I would say, very good job. More people are thinking about, oh, this man is someone I should learn more about. And also curiosity. So where would they begin? What would you recommend as the first couple of books?
In general, people should begin with Bhagavad Gita. And if you ask for interpretation of Bhagavad Gita, I will recommend our Swamiji's book, The Essential Concepts in Bhagavad Gita, particularly the first volume. And also recently he has written particularly for application insights into Bhagavad Gita. But Bhagavad Gita is the basic grantha where we can start from. So that is the starting point. But what I want people to appreciate is that self-realization or spiritual, the pinnacle, is not a desireful goal that I have the desire to become self-realized and one day we become fine morning, we find that we have become a self-realized person. It is not like that. It is the cultivation of this fourfold, the sadhana chatushtaya, fourfold qualities. And you go on cultivating this, more and more you cultivate, you come closer and closer to the soul. That is, you discover that I am like this, I am like this. Previously, you were always stressed, always small, always constricted, having lot of delusion. And all these, slowly they get purified. You become, your mind gets purified. Finally, the mind becomes the soul. So it's a process of cleansing and purification.
Wonderful. So there are a few more questions. I think we'll go for a few more minutes, if that's okay. How may I understand my own personal karma, which sometimes I feel opposes my dharma? So karma versus dharma.
Dharma, that Arjuna also had the same problem, that he was thinking that fighting the war is opposing his dharma, because he did not have a clear idea about what the dharma is. Many military people or police people may think in that manner, that I am doing something which is not good. But because of that, they may develop a sinfulness. But what was the correction given in Bhagavad Gita? Arjuna was taught that you are not fighting the war for winning the kingdom. In first chapter, 45th verse or so, he said that Yat Rajya Sukha Lobhena Antum Swajana Mudyataha. If Arjuna was killing his own people for Rajya Sukha Lobha, but the greed for enjoying the kingdom. Kingdom is never enjoyable, but forget about that. Enjoying the kingdom, then it was sinful. Mahapapa, no doubt about it. But Krishna repeatedly made him understand that it is not for that. It is for establishing a righteous kingdom on earth that he has to fight the war. And war is his swadharma. If he fights for its personal gain, for personal some ambition or something, then it becomes corrupted. But if he does it for the whatever he is fit for and whatever is needed by the society, for the welfare of the society, for the keeping the society on the auspicious path, then it is his swadharma also. It is his swakarma, it is his swadharma. Now the desires are not allowing us to understand what is my sadharma. We are not able to understand because of desires, the greed. Suppose many people are very good artists, but because there is more money or prestige or whatever in all of you, the Silicon Valley, the
Software people.
computer. So everybody takes to computer application. But the person may be not at all fit for that. He may have lot of qualities. He can become a very good artist or a literature. Anything can happen. It is they are losing their swadharma because of the desire. When the desires are removed, it is just like allowing a flower to blossom with its own color and fragrance and all. So that the desires are the kidas, desires are the insects, which is not allowing the petals to open up. So when the desires are removed, the red flower will blossom as a beautiful red flower with its own fragrance, and the small grass flower will blossom in an equally beautiful manner. We people have desires, so we don't consider the grass flower to be beautiful and the big rose to be beautiful. That is our problem, not nature's problem. Nature is always beautiful with its own swadharma.
Beautifully said, Swamiji. I have a question. Throughout this festival, all the Swamijis and speakers have sort of described the world when Adi Shankara came. 72 religions, so much chaos, confusion. I'm almost seeming like the world we live in today, right now, also seems like that. Do you feel that way? I mean, do you think it's time for Adi Shankara to come again, or in some form?
See, there are so many. It is not that Adi Shankara will come in his form. As I said, each era, whatever is needed, according to that, the corresponding, we call it avatar also, that corresponding manifestation takes place. So Vivekananda and Adi Shankara are not same, but it is similar manifestation. Ramakrishna and Adi Shankara are entirely different. Buddha and Adi Shankara are different. Even before that, Vyasadeva was different, Krishna was different, Rama was different. So it depends on the era, the time when the person is born. And there will be always, at least in India, there will be so many people born from era to era who will try for this. We call it Loka Sangraha, putting back the society on the auspicious track. Because of that, we have great faith that nothing is going to happen. However bad things may flourish, the society, if we keep to this, if we honor this fundamental line of auspiciousness, the society will always be on track. So this Loka Sangra people do to bring back the society on the auspicious track.
So Swamiji, I will take that as your blessing to the world, that this Loka Sangraha alone will essentially drive this the superpower in whatever form, or maybe how many ever forms that they come, to sort of bring back and set the society back on track again. So thank you once again. We are running out of time, unfortunately, but there are lots of questions. We have also shared your website and also your email address for those that want to send any questions. Please be discreet in your emails to Swamiji's, but definitely his email is in the chat box. So you may email him with any specific questions, or if you want to learn more about their ashram. And thank you once again, Nutan Swamiji, for your very, very lucid yet profound message. It was just wonderful. I have never heard Upanishads being talked in this way. It was really brilliant. You have sort of extracted a scientific brilliance so simply. Thank you once again. We sincerely appreciate, and pranams to you.
Okay. Actually, that makes this, if we understand Upanishad and Shankara in this manner, Shankara becomes the most important personality for the modern world, that he has always emphasized the sadhana chatushtaya. That has to be understood in our own manner and practiced.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking that there should be a separate talk, by you sometime in the future on this topic at length. So, because if you said that is the message we have to spread, then we will definitely consider. So, thank you for your contribution to Advaita Academy Festival. Thank you once again. It's early in the morning. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks to all the listeners, and I will try to answer all the emails, whatever comes.
Thank you so much. Very, very kind of you. Very kind of you. Namaste. Namaste.